This is the Tudors, Dynasty, and Beyond podcast. History with a twist. And now your host, Rebecca Larson.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rebecca Larson, and today I have a very special episode for you, something a little bit different than what we normally do. Today we're talking about Shakespeare, but we're also talking about paintings and portraits, which I know you all love, and identifying them, which is something that you all love, and one of the reasons why you come to this show. Today I am joined by Steve Wadlow and Madoc Roberts. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
So, Steve, behind you, if you guys are watching this video right now, behind you, you see a painting of Shakespeare. And this is what we're talking about today, because maybe we should start from the beginning. I need everybody to understand where this painting came from and where it had been sitting for so many years.
Yes. Well, the first thing, obviously, I suppose I better point out is that this is in our sitting room and it's just a copy, because the real one is now unfortunately locked away in the dark somewhere, keeping it safe. This all started in late 2012. This current quest started in late 2012. The painting was sat above my parents' television in their home, and it had been there for 50 years at that point. I'd grown up with it. My dad was a little bit of an art dealer, but not really. He was more of an antique sort of dealer and picture frame restorer and picture framer. And he'd bought it or acquired it in the late 60s. Was told he'd paid too much for it, wasn't going to make the profit he'd hoped, and was advised to take it home and hang it on the wall, which he did. And it then sat there anonymous for all those years. And then one day Dad was watching an episode of Time Team. I'm not sure if you have that in the States, but that's a program in the UK where it's an archaeology sort of dig, and places are dug up and looked into. And this particular
well-made
episode,
program, wasn't it, Stephen?
It was a very well-made program, because it turned out you were involved, didn't it? But yes. Yeah. And this program was about Shakespeare's home, new place in Stratford upon Avon, which of course had been demolished criminally at some point, but that's another story. And that they were excavating the footings of New Place, but they kept flashing up images of Shakespeare, which my dad and I, and really the family, had no particular interest in, which I know is a terrible thing to say, but it's true at the time. And this image that kept coming up was the Cob. And my dad thought, oh, that looks a little bit similar to the painting above the television. It turns out I don't really think it is that similar, but I understand where he was coming from. And so he phoned me up and said, can you look up about Shakespeare? I think our chap in the corner could be Shakespeare. I've always wondered who he is. Let's see if it is. So I said, yes, I will. And then I didn't bother, because so what? And I was very busy. And then, by amazing coincidence, a couple of weeks later, a visitor came. Won't go into that all now and how and why, but she'd never been to the house before. And the first thing she said when she came into the sitting room was, oh, I like your copy of Shakespeare in the corner. And my dad took it off the wall and rather flamboyantly handed it to her and said, well, it's not a copy, it's an original, but we're not sure who it is. And she then said we needed to look into it. I then thought, once Dad had relayed this story to me, maybe we do. I started to look into it over that Christmas, because this was all happening early December. And then it just all started and snowballed from there.
Yeah, it's been
I became a bit obsessed.
Yeah, this is what happens with history. I think sometimes we latch on to a piece of history and then we just deep dive into it. But that's the fun part. I want to introduce Madoc now, because Madoc is a documentary filmmaker, director. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
So my question is, how did you get introduced to Steve? Like, when did that happen exactly?
Yeah.
Okay.
When did that unfortunate incident occur?
I think it must have been 2015, so 10 years ago. It was 1 year before the 400th anniversary of Shakespeare's death. So 2016 was going to be the 400th anniversary. So being a television company, you're always looking for dates, to base documentaries on. So, but being a small company, we weren't going to get the big biography or anything like that. So we had to look for a little sort of niche type thing. And I've done a lot of work in my career working on arts programs. So that's what I knew. So I thought, well, why not try and do a program on portraits of Shakespeare? So I started looking into it, and then we thought, well, the one thing that we really need is somebody who thinks they've got one. Looked on the web. There were a few websites there, but the one that really stood out because it was a complete shambles was Mr. Wadlow's. I thought here's a man who's clearly obsessed.
It was the first attempt as well.
Yeah, he'd be good telly, I thought. So I phoned him up. We had a chat. We got on immediately, and then we decided that we'd go and film with Stephen, do our first bit of filming, in the hope that making a little promo, then we could sell it, and it would all be over in a year or two. 10 years later, here we are. Went to filming, and after meeting Stephen, it became clear that Stephen was not going to be as directable as perhaps other people might be, and that the best thing to do was just to let him go, wind him up and let him go, which is what we did. And he was brilliant. I mean, Stephen is fearless on camera. Most people become tongue-tied, and Stephen just talks to the camera like he's talking to you now. He just waltzed into the house saying, "This is where I live, my dad was a framer, his mum, his dad, I say hello." And here's the painting on the wall. And I thought, well, he did it in one take, all done in one take. Cameraman said, "Do we need another one?" No point. That was perfect. How could you improve on that? And that's been our sort of working relationship ever since. And I've got involved in the research, as a good documentary filmmaker would, when making film. The trouble is, as I say, it was originally meant to be done and dusted for 2016. That didn't happen. But along the way, I've been filming with Stephen for 10 years. He's filmed stuff on his own, on his camera. I've filmed with him. We've had crews in filming with him. And we decided we'd make our own film. We tried to get it made by other broadcasters. They showed some interest, but not enough. So we made it ourselves. And then we sent it off to various broadcasters. And lo and behold, one Friday afternoon, Netflix came back and said, "Yep, we love it." Amazing. And then on the back of that, PBS saw the version that Netflix had made and said, "Oh, we'd like one of those for our series Secrets of the Dead." So we then had to add expert interviews, which actually was a blessing, wasn't it, Stephen? Because the one thing that Stephen had always felt was that he wasn't getting any engagement from academics and experts in the field. So making this version for which we call Picturing Shakespeare for PBS, we were able to speak to Tanya Cooper, who I consider to be the world's leading expert on Shakespeare portraits, Lena Orlin, who wrote Secret Life of William Shakespeare, Charles Nicoll, who wrote The Lodger, a lovely Italian professor called Emanuel Stelzer, who's written on the stage, on portraits on the stage, and things like that. So we were really lucky, and Stephen, having brought the painting along, so we got to meet them all. They all so for the first time, I think, really, Stephen, you got to meet some pretty powerful people from the world of Shakespeare's theatre and the portraits.
It was terrifying.
I can relate to that. I have had moments like that in my career.
Especially as for a few years prior to that, I've been complaining about all these academics that hadn't shown any interest because I'm just a working class chap, and it had been true, but then it wasn't, because they did listen, and they were all lovely, and they all gave us their time, and so yeah.
What was lovely to see was that Stephen, I mean, when Stephen started this, I don't think I'm doing you down here, Stephen. You had no interest in Shakespeare, you had no interest in art, but by the time we met these people this year, Stephen was talking like, a PhD in Elizabethan portraiture and Shakespeare's life. He could converse with these people who are at the top of their field. It's obviously a very niche, small area of knowledge, but he's got it all. It was a joy. Yeah.
It's amazing, Steve. I feel like you and I are kindred spirits in that respect, because we both find an interest in something and we just go for it, right? You dive deep, start digging, learn all that you can. Yep. That's really what you did with this. And then when you got to the point where you couldn't go any further, you reached out for help, didn't you?
That's it. Exactly that. Yes. Yeah. I learned a lot more about history in that period than I ever did at school when I wasn't particularly interested.
I think it's just absolutely fantastic that this painting was hanging in your dad's sitting room above the television for so many years, and you guys had no idea what valuable piece of history was sitting there.
Yeah, exactly that. Well, hopefully. The funny thing is, if it had have happened years before that, I don't think this would have happened, because one of the other great benefits, or not great benefits, one of the other great helps was, of course, the internet, which is why my dad wanted me to look at it, because he hasn't got a computer. If this had have happened 20 years ago, I'd have been going around libraries and all the rest of it. I don't know. The internet was an easy tool to be able to start to find out. Obviously, you have to find out more after that and go deeper. But initially, that was something that was a godsend that we wouldn't have had years prior.
So my question for you is, you had some great connections on dating this portrait, and looking at it. I don't remember the technology, what it was all called, but being able to look at the different layers of it and to see if there was overpainting and things like that. How did you even go about finding those things out? And then Madoc, the second question would go to you, like, were you just along for the ride at this point?
Well, go on, Stephen. You start.
Well, before Madoc and I had started working together, I'm going to say, on this, I didn't have a clue, as you're saying, about where to go and how to find things out. But I thought the first thing I need to do is find out if this is a genuine painting or if it's just something that's been painted. We certainly knew it was over 50 years old, because it had been in the sitting room. Mm-hmm. It's certainly, because it's on a wooden panel, it's the rear of the panel, you could certainly tell it was old. And my dad was always insisting it was Tudor, and he'd been told, funnily enough, he'd been told it was 1595, but that's a much longer story. And so I was pretty sure and confident that we were looking at something that could easily be the age of something from Shakespeare's time. But I thought, well, we need to get that verified. So the first thing I did was take it to one of the top art experts, or not art historian, but one of the best art experts stroke dealers, through a mutual sort of contact that we luckily had. And I took it up to his gallery, and he looked at it, and this is a much longer story, but we haven't got the time for it. But I took it to him, and he looked at it and confirmed it was, in his view, correct to the period of Shakespeare. And he dated it around 1595, 1610. So it was all the right area. So that was all very, very good. So that then gave me the encouragement to then proceed further. So then I always like to try to go for the top, and I don't always get there, but a lot of the time, funny enough, you go for the top. Sometimes you do okay.
Yeah. And
I contacted the Hamilton Carr Institute in Cambridge, part of Cambridge University, which is only about an hour and a half from where I live, and asked them if they'd X-ray it. So they were very interested, and they did. And that's when we sort of were looking at there wasn't another painting underneath and all that sort of thing. And the chap there at the time, Rupert Featherstone, who I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe he used to look after the Queen's paintings at the time on the Royal Conservation and stuff. So he was somebody that knew what he was talking about. He again backed up it was genuine to the period, etc., etc. So this kept going on, and we kept having little steps forward. Nothing that was proving it was Shakespeare, but nothing was proving that it wasn't, or it wouldn't be from his lifetime. And then many years later, once Madoc was involved, we still wanted belts and braces on that. So then we had the dendrochronology done. So again, I contacted the top dendrochronology person in the country, and he came down here, sat in the kitchen and did his magic. And that all worked out as well. Okay. So nothing's ever gone backwards. There's been lots since, but I'll let Madoc go on to that bit. So
well, I think the thing that you need with the painting is provenance. That's the thing. Without provenance, you've got nothing really. But there are two elements to it. One is the history of the painting. The other one is the science. And so what we were able to do is contact UCL, University College London, who had a hyperspectral imaging camera, which to me is just a magic light, which will show you beneath the surface like an X-ray, but it can start to look at colours, layers and things like that. And what Stephen's painting's got underneath is a coat of arms, a hidden coat of arms, which if we could find out what it is, might be the big breakthrough. It might be the one thing that will tell us if it's Shakespeare or not. But Stephen, and this is all to his full credit, doesn't want to do anything that's going to damage the painting. He doesn't want to just scrape away and have a look underneath. So we spent years trying to find a method, a scientific method of looking underneath of it. And so you go along to somewhere like UCL, and as Stephen says, you go there and you don't know them. You think this might be the day that they say, nope, it's definitely not Shakespeare. It's something completely different. It's never happened. It just hasn't happened. And in fact, what happened with UCL was they said that the fancy collar that goes around the outside, the lace collar, was a later addition, which means it looks even more like the original pictures of Shakespeare in the first folio, the Droto engraving. Yeah. So everything that's happened so far has gone in that direction. We've been to Paris, saw a chap there who said, yep, definitely, he thinks it's Shakespeare. He saw underdrawing and therefore thought it was done from life. And he thought it was Shakespeare dressed as an actor. That's what he thought. That was his theory. So we get all these, and you just don't know. Again, you turn up in Paris. This chap is one of the world's leading experts. He's handled the Mona Lisa and things like that. And all of a sudden, he's saying to Stephen Wadlow, the window cleaner from Aylesbury, you, my friend, have got a portrait of William Shakespeare. It's amazing. It's an absolutely amazing story. I mean, I landed on my feet finding Stephen, really, because it's a brilliant story. Shut up. It's a brilliant. It's a brilliant story, and he's great. He's great on camera. And
the thing is mutual, but anyway.
and the thing is that Stephen's level of knowledge now, I mean, and the research he's done, finding out the Great Tew connection. We should really mention the Great Tew connection. Great, because the one thing that his father had told Stephen was that it came from a manor house within a sort of 10-mile radius of Banbury. So there are a few, but they're not that many. But he also gave a description, which was that it didn't look like the sort of classical mansion house with columns and all symmetrical. It looked more like a row of houses. So then Stephen goes along to Great Tew, you can't quite see the
after looking on the internet.
After looking on the internet, and there it is. There it is, this house that looks like a row of houses, exactly like as his father described. And so you think, okay, great, we found out where it is. But not only that, later on, a few years later, he discovered that Great Tew has links to Shakespeare paintings. Yeah. The Chandos portrait, which is National Portrait Gallery #1, the British Mona Lisa, was once owned by the same family who owned Great Tew. So that painting probably came to Great Tew. But not only that, the man who owned it, Robert Keck, had a second portrait of Shakespeare, and his second portrait of Shakespeare was painted in 1595, and it was oil on board. So Stephen's painting is 1595, oil on board, and came from the same place as the Chandos, and where a second portrait of Shakespeare is.
And has a 31.
And has a 31 at the top.
Yes.
And in the year 1595, Shakespeare was 31. So it's a barrage of coincidences is the only way I could describe it. Yeah. They come pretty slowly. It's been 10 years, but every step of the way, something just turns up and you think, okay, that's how can that be? How can this keep happening? But it does. I think the way that Stephen's come into this, is not the usual way. As Tanya Cooper says in the Picturing Shakespeare documentary, you don't start off saying, is this Shakespeare? You start off by saying, okay, so it's oil on board panel, oil on panel painting, it's da-da-da-da-da-da. Stephen obviously didn't have the option to take that route, and at the time didn't know how to do these things. So he's done it in his own very, very individual way, and all credit to him for that, I'd say. Yeah.
And this PBS program's certainly going to make it more, get it out there more with the experts now giving their time and discussing it. Hopefully it's going to be.
When we spoke about making a documentary in the first place, the reason to make it was to start discussion. That's everything we've done is because trying to get people to engage with the research and to look at it and say, okay, you've gone wrong here. This is interesting. This is right. Keep going in this direction. Don't go in that direction. That's what we really want, is for people to say, it's too late to say stop. That's not going to happen. So if anybody can advise us what to do, where to go with it, that's always welcome.
Well, now being on PBS, and it's called Picturing Shakespeare. Now that you're on PBS, you are opened up to a huge American audience who there are quite a few people in this country who are interested in Shakespeare and have studied him. So
Definitely.
I'm very hopeful for you that this is going to open some doors and windows that you were unaware of before, Steve and Madoc.
Hopefully. Yeah, yes, definitely that. I mean, and with this sort of thing, there'll be people saying, "Oh, you're mad," and there'll be people saying, "We understand," and all the rest of it. But you have to put it out there. And we try to be transparent with everything we find, which is not always the case in such sort of stories. But there's no point in not being transparent, otherwise you're only fooling yourself. So, it's just there, get it discussed. I mean, we do get contacted, like different people around the world that have done AI facial comparisons, which we've done ourselves, obviously, and the chap in France did. I mean, which always come out very good as well, which of course will be on the program. But people tend to contribute a bit. They just sort of come out of nowhere and offer opinions, and if that increases and we get more like that, one day we might get a silver bullet coming through that helps the case.
Yeah. Steve, my question then is, if people are watching this PBS show, documentary on this, and they have some insight and they want to reach out to you, what's going to be the best way for them to contact you?
Yep. So our website is thiswilliamshakespeare.com, which does what it says on the tin, really, I suppose, in that it's, we're not saying it is. I believe it is, but is this William Shakespeare? And on there, you can email Madoc or I direct.
Perfect.
And we will always get back to people.
Well,
so that would be lovely.
I think it's William Shakespeare too, if that makes you.
Excellent, thank you.
And the last thing that I want to ask you, Steve, is for the other people who are out there sitting with paintings in their house, portraits of some figure from history, and they've always looked at it and wondered, could this be something? What piece of advice would you give somebody in that situation?
Difficult, because I still feel we're on the journey, so I don't know if I'm actually qualified enough to say, do this and this will work. But if you're trying to find out who somebody is, I mean, don't do it the way I have, and maybe start from looking at it more objectively rather than, is this a particular person? Because obviously that was the wrong way, but as Madoc said earlier, that was the only sort of way I had, and then became fixated with that. But don't start doing anything unless you're prepared for it to go on for a very long time, be extremely frustrating, but also be great fun. And, don't think you're going to make a quick buck, as it were. I mean, it might be, it's different with a lot of art. So say somebody thinks they've got a Monet or something like that hanging on their wall, or a Van Gogh. They can generally take that to an auction house or to some experts. It's still a long journey, but they would say, well, don't be ridiculous. That's nothing like him. Sometimes they could be wrong, but, there's the specific experts on specific art or specific china, whatever the antique or thing is. So I'm taking it back to ours. The difficulty we have is art and Shakespeare. It's two areas that can be contentious in many ways. So we sort of got double whammy. But yeah, follow your gut, see how far it goes. But if it's starting to look like you're wrong, then accept that and back down, because otherwise you could possibly waste many years.
Yeah.
Which hopefully we haven't. And I wouldn't say we've wasted, because it's been great fun and we're getting a lot of interest.
I was going to say that the level of education that you've given yourself, the fun that you've had on the way. It's art, history.
It's frustrating but fun.
Shakespeare,
even doing this sort of thing. And thank you for this. We wouldn't. If it hadn't been for that, we wouldn't be doing this. So.
I love it. Well, it's called Picturing Shakespeare. It's available on PBS, and I want to thank you both for being here today. It's been an absolute pleasure meeting you, and I hope somebody reaches out to you, Steve, with some more information.
Well,
thank you very much, Rebecca.
And I'm hoping that we can have another one coming back with some great revelation.
Yes, you definitely.
You never know with what's going on at the moment. You never know. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. You have a great rest of your day.
Thanks
And
very
you.
much,
Take
Becca.
care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Tudors, Dynasty, and Beyond. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so you never miss a new release. And if you loved it, leave a quick review. It helps more history lovers find the show. Want to support the podcast and get bonus content? Head to patreon.com/tudorsdynasty. You can also find the link in the show notes of this episode. You can also join the conversation with me on social media at Tudors Dynasty. Until next time, thanks for keeping history alive with me.